Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about Episode 5 of Season 3 of The Walking Dead, called Say the Word. And before we get into the episode, I gotta say, I know I've harped on this a little bit before in my reviews, but I am really just thrilled with how tight the writing on this season has been so far. Again, it is an enormous improvement over what was going on in Season 2 on just so many levels. Now, let's get right into it. After last episode, there was something interesting I saw over on the website Television Without Pity, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a review site, forum site. If you're a fan of TV, it's a pretty nice website to check out if you're into American TV. And after that episode, they put up this little poll. What is Rick's reaction to Lori's death going to be? They had several choices, of course, but the one that won hands down among the fans was Rick flips out and goes on a zombie slaying rampage. Usually I don't put a whole lot of stock in fan predictions of what's going to happen on shows because, 90% of the time, at best, they're wrong. But I won't lie. I voted for Rick going on the zombie killing rampage, and Rick did not disappoint us. I mean, he really does have exactly one word of dialogue this entire episode. Another website, if you're a fan of TV or just media in general, that I have repeatedly referenced in my reviews is called TV Tropes. And they have a little something on there called, where they talk about various reoccurring elements. I don't want to say cliches because that's not accurate at all. I think reoccurring element is the more accurate way they define the term trope. Again, not a cliche, but what they have they have one on there that really applies to Rick, and it's called the heroic blue screen of death, and that is when our heroic protagonist just kind of snaps and just sort of mentally shuts down to a pretty astonishing degree. And while Rick's zombie rampage was a little bit more than him flailing around and screaming like we saw at the end of last episode, I still think it counts. And yeah, there really is no words to really describe. I don't really think that anything really needs to be said about that other than it does make perfect sense that Rick would react that way. Now, I was a little worried about just where it was they were going to go when we found there was a walker in the area where Lori died. It was kind of confirmed by the creators that Carl didn't choke; he really did shoot Lori in the head. So we were never going to see the zombie Lori, and frankly, I'm glad of that. But the thing that I really took note of in that scene, of course, was the cliffhanger with Rick picking up the phone. Now, as I have said, I have read the comics. I've read the vast majority of them. There's the last year or so's worth. I don't think I've had the chance to pick up and read yet. But I'm familiar with the storyline from the prison and what happens quite a bit beyond that. So I know what happens with the phone call in the comics. I'm not going to spoil any of that aspect for you, but I do think it's actually quite an interesting comment on Rick's character in how he deals with that situation. And I'm interested to see if they do go in the same direction here in the TV show. They have, of course, changed a lot of things from the comics to the TV show. New characters, people dying at different points, yada yada yada. But yeah, I do think this has some potential to be some very nice drama, very nice characterization of Rick on the way in regards to what's happening with the phone. Now, while we're on the subject of the folks at the prison, let's go through and talk about them, and then we'll move over to what's happening in Woodbury. One thing that was really impressed me was they took a moment to I don't want to use the word have a moment. I don't want to use the word reconciliation between Herschel and Glenn because their characters really, I don't think were quite in need of that. But given that it wasn't that long ago, at least in terms of episodes, that Herschel was referring to Glenn as that Asian boy, the little talk that they have about how Glenn really was regretting saying it, but he would trade strangers for the people that he knew if it came down to that. And of course about his comments to the Axel and Oscar about how the people who have died were his family, essentially his adopted family after what has all happened. Yeah, that was just some really great stuff on the part of Glenn. And again, he and Herschel, we haven't really seen them interact too much. And when we have, it's always been in relation to Maggie. Now, Maggie is, of course, front and center on both of their minds in this situation. How could it not be? But with that said, you have to think that at this point, Herschel is also on the list of people that Glenn includes his family. And I think this was an acknowledgement that Herschel feels the same way. And I really do like that. I do really enjoy that they're taking the time to show us these two characters who've not had a super huge amount to do with each other. And even then, only through their mutual connection to a third character, really just coming together and having a moment that is just between them. That is really a bonding moment between Herschel and Glenn. Now, as I've said, there are, of course, extenuating relations or whatever. You get what I'm saying, I think. Now, not really a lot going on with Carl this episode. He's he just shot his mom in the head, so he's rebooting. But I did think that Carl had a particularly poignant moment when they asked him in regards to what they were going to be calling his sister, and he just starts rattling off the names of all the women who've died on this show since the very beginning. And if you really do stop and think about it, it's quite a list. Not that the list of men who've died on this show hasn't also been very extensive, but it really was a needed reminder of just how much emotionally these guys have been through. And of course, I do like that a character like Jackie has not been forgotten. I liked Jackie. I sort of wish she'd hung around a little bit longer, but Jackie's character served her purpose, and her death made sense in terms of storytelling for the show and for her character. Excuse me a sec. My throat's really been giving me heck all week, so I'm still kind of getting through it. Now, of course, we get to see some really nice stuff going on with Daryl this time around. Gee, who would have ever thought that a guy like Daryl was good with babies? And we also see him take some time to plant flowers on Lori's grave. Now, remember that episode Cherokee Rose, I believe was the title? Daryl does have some familiarity with flowers. I mean, I'm not saying that he's probably secretly dreamed of being a florist or something like that, but a guy who spent as much time out in the woods and around nature as Daryl, it makes sense that he would have some genuine knowledge of plants. And again, I just like how he is more than you would think that he is. He does have hidden depths, and he's a smarter, more caring guy than he really lets on. Now, granted, he's lowered his defenses around the group quite a bit, but I like that Daryl can still surprise us. Now, yeah, boy, my voice is really getting to me again. Wow, this is not been a good week for me in terms of doing these reviews in my voice, but I'm going to soldier on and try and wrap this up. Now, the governor over in Woodbury, his seduction, I guess, of Andrea, in a way, it reminds me of stuff I've read about cults. Slowly they introduce you to more and more extreme behavior, and every step along the way, they're rationalizing it. They're pushing you. They're manipulating you. I mean, Michan even says, the whole thing of Merle throwing the door open and saying, "Okay, there you go if you want to leave," is the governor manipulating them, and she's almost certainly right. The governor is clearly a master manipulator, and just look at what he's done. He's convinced guys that it's cool to gun down and steal National Guard guys who would have been an enormous help to that community, just to maintain his power and control. Now, the conflict between Michan and the governor. Now, this is really a case of two people who are polar opposites, but really are very much equals in all other aspects. Michan is really a person who is all about controlling herself. She's really a samurai, really. Now, folks, I've used to live in Japan, almost 3 years there, and if I can speak broadly about the Japanese as a people, nobody, in my estimation, does self-discipline like the Japanese. It is truly, truly astonishing what folks over there can do if they really, really put their minds to it. Now, granted, that's true for people all over the world, but I've never really seen people do it quite as well as the Japanese. And really, as I said, Michonne, in her own way, it really is a samurai. She is in total control of herself, and she is nobody's fool. And of course, that's part of what makes her such a great character. Her only real weakness is that she does care for Andrea. She has opened herself up that much to care about one person, and that is her vulnerability. And the governor, he is all about controlling other people. And the governor, of course, is not above using Andrea to get through to Michan. But I do really enjoy that interplay between them. It's really just like watching two tigers circle each other. It's going to be ugly when it happens, but it's also going to be one hell of a fight. Although I am slightly irritated with Michan when she broke open that warehouse and let the walkers come at her. She really did have no way, as best I can tell, of knowing how many of those things were in there. If there had been 20 of those, I think she might have been in a little bit of trouble. But, on the other hand, if all of those guys were clustered up around the gates, snarling at her, then, well, I doubt that very many of them, if there had been some walkers hanging around in the background, would have just sort of stood around there and done nothing. So maybe she figured that the ones she saw were a pretty safe estimation of how many there were. That's just something that crossed my mind, so I thought I'd share it with you. Now, moving on to the gladiator fights. Well, again, this is an example of the whole seduction thing that I was talking about. Andrea, of course, her immediate reaction is this is the same reaction most of us would have. This is horrible, this is barbaric, this shouldn't be allowed. You allowing this is wrong. And then, of course, the governor takes her aside, and slowly and carefully, he rationalizes this. He explains why this is okay. And the scary thing is, what he's doing does kind of make sense. But that does not invalidate Andrea's points. So, it is really a very interesting change in their dynamic. Andrea is now starting to see that Michan may have been onto something. Now, where is this going to go? Well, we're just going to have to see. If I can go back to something that I've harped on briefly before, with Merle kind of poking and taunting at the walkers with his one good hand. Seriously, Merle, for the love of God, put on some gloves. I mean, I know Merle's a crazy bastard, but just poking at things, that can turn you into a zombie if they just so much as nick you? Man, Merle, I gotta wonder if you got a death wish, dude. I mean, at least when the zombie went after the scientist guy, he was using one of those pads that they use to train police dogs to take people down. I actually grew up across the street from a guy who was a canine officer in the local cops. So, I've picked up a little bit about that sort of thing. But yeah, police dogs are nothing to mess with. But that's a completely unrelated tangent, and I don't even know why I was starting to go off in that direction. But yeah, it it is very interesting to see the way that Merle has adapted to this world. Even more so than before he lost his hand. He fits in. He fits into this strange and horrible place that the world has become. And even more so than anybody, even more so than Andrea or Michonne, he's found Woodbury as a place where he can, of all things, thrive. It's it's a very interesting way to highlight his character, and also, of course, more than a little disturbing. I mean, man, this is the most screwed up UFC fight ever, huh, folks? Ah, yes. One last thing before I go. Looking at the governor's relationship with the zombie girl, Penny. There was one thing that I do remember reading I believe it was actually the letter columns of the comics, where they and I don't think I'm spoiling too much by saying that yes, there was something similar in the comics, but there they basically said, I guess it was Robert Kirkman, the creator of Walking Dead, who was answering these. It's been years since I read this particular issue, so pardon me if I'm a little hazy on the details, but he said that the comic book version of the governor, that might not even have been his daughter. That might have just been some random little zombie girl he grabbed somewhere and just kept around calling his daughter for his own bizarre, twisted amusement. I mean, this is a guy who, as I said in my previous review, would sit around and watch zombie heads in fish tanks as his version of chilling out in front of the TV. And in the comics, I thought that was just brilliant. I mean, it's just horrible and creepy and awful and totally in keeping with the comics version of the governor. Here, I legitimately think we have every reason to believe that really is his daughter. I mean, we saw the picture, we saw the girl, maybe not quite as clear, but difference between them. But I'm 100% sure it's the same actress. So I think I'm going to take the governor, this situation, as being what it is. That really is the governor's daughter. But looking at his notebook, was anyone else reminded of "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy" from The Shining, which incidentally is a really really great movie. And of course, go and watch the Jack Nicholson version, not the TV movie version one that they did several like back in the late 90s or something or whatever. Seriously, if you're gonna watch The Shining, watch the freaking one, the Stanley Kubrick, Jack Nicholson, creepy as all hell version. And I think that covers everything I had to say about this, folks. This is oddly enough a little bit of a breather episode, but after everything that happened last time around, I think it's something we needed. But there's certainly a lot going on. The story is definitely moving forward, and we're in for a heck of a ride this season, and I am absolutely loving it. So with that said, folks, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.